Hi guys, and welcome to this episode of the Second Count podcast. I'm Paul, your host, and I'm joined with Neil, who's going to introduce himself now.
Hi there, yeah. My name's Neil from Remote Medical Response, and I'm a remote EMT. My background is military, frontline ambulance service, emergency contingency fire service, and remote medic. Yeah.
Cool. So you just mentioned your background a little bit there, but actually what got you into this side of things? Was it military? Was you medic in the military, or was it the
No,
military that
actually
got you
not.
into it?
No. So in the military, I was an engineer,
Okay.
and years and years ago, probably around about 2010, actually, I've always had an interest in medical field, and I was like, I think I wouldn't mind doing something like that in the future. And then obviously, like busy life, it sort of got put on the back burner, and then probably around about 2018, a colleague of mine, good friend of mine, he was actually a medic, a CMT in the army. And when he came into Civistry, he said, "Oh, why don't you get into the medical field? It's really good. You can get your training sorted out and get onto the front line." Obviously, it was around about when sort of the private sector was sort of kicking off, really. And hard about it. Worked in a few other jobs on, when I left the military, and didn't really sort of get on with it. So yeah, put a bit more thought into it, and then COVID happened, and I was like, perfect time, really. Private ambulance services were crying out for medics, so I took the step really to go and train through the sort of. I was working at the time, but doing the training in my spare time. Worked my way up, and then I thought, right, I'm going to just approach private ambulance company and see who's going to, willing to take me on, which I did. Worked over for Northwest Ambulance Service. And yeah, basically back end of COVID, was working out there, and just sort of progressed from there, really. I never really intended to get into remote medicine, but because obviously I'm an outdoors person, and I thought, well, it makes sense. Obviously hiking all the time and wild camping and whatnot. Remote medicine was sort of ideal route for me, really, bit of a progression. And that's how it all really started, to be fair.
Yeah. So you mentioned then Northwest Ambulance Service, so you're the same trust as me.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, I didn't realise you were so close. Which private ambulance was it?
Well, so the problem was I live 2 hours away from Manchester.
Right, okay.
So this is the next part of the story. So I got in with a private ambulance service, which obviously had a contract with Northwest, and I absolutely loved it. To be fair, I really enjoyed the type of work that we did, and it wasn't just. The contract I worked on wasn't PTS; it was frontline contract. And it could be anywhere from a Cat 4 to a Cat 1.
I did
Quite
the same thing
varied.
during COVID, yeah. I was doing the same
Yeah,
thing.
and the problem I had was, at the time, I was traveling, like say, I was doing 16 hours a day, basically. Traveling 2 hours to get to work, doing a 12-hour shift, and then traveling 2 hours home. At the beginning, because of the shifts that I worked, I was working 12/12s, so 12 midday till midnight, and it was quite late to travel home. Absolutely exhausted. So I ended up staying in a hotel, but then our shift changed, and I think in the end it was like 9/9, so it wasn't too bad. But yeah, it just got to the point where we're working 12-hour shifts, and then ambulances start queuing up outside A&E, and it's just like, you go from seeing maybe 8 patients a day to 2 a day, and it's not something I really signed up for. And no fault of the company I was working for, but just in general, I was getting just absolutely exhausted mentally. So I had the opportunity to go work overseas, work on cargo ships, which is what I did for a little while, and absolutely enjoyed that. Going on the experience from working in the military, which is what they requested. You need to come from a military background. And yeah, so yeah, I mean, it's hard because obviously loving the job, going out there basically doing what you're trained to do, getting a mixture of all sorts of different jobs. Anything from, you got your Doris who's falling over and you've got to go pick her up off the floor, to, your Cat 1s where your adrenaline's pumping and, so it's just a whirlwind. I mean, I've still got friends who are still out on the front line. After working overseas, I did try and see if we can get something more local. I'm in East Midlands catchment, and I don't know. I think sometimes you got to step back and see what your priorities are. I had a young family at the time. Just got married. Literally, I got married, and then 2 weeks later, I went away for 4 months working overseas. So you sort of got to look at the bigger picture and think, right, okay, what's going to be best all around, really. So I sort of decided to work a bit more on remote medical response, and do a bit of contracting locally as opposed to, a couple of hours away, or even, let's say, overseas. It's always there, with remote medical response. There's a lot of things going on, expedition support and stuff like that. So, but just at the minute, just priorities are obviously trying to be with family a bit more.
Yeah. So when you were offshore, it was cargo ships you mentioned. How did you find skill-wise what was that like?
Yeah, so it's quite surprising actually. It was a big eye opener. It was obviously, apart from the military, it was my main one of the biggest sort of civilian sort of deployments, really. I had a contact who I met over, I believe it was over Instagram, and we're quite good friends now. Actually, we talk all the time, and we studied at the same college.
Wow.
Never mind. Sure, I didn't realise it didn't have enough charge in it. Yeah, so I had a contact, I believe that's I met from Instagram, who was working on cargo ships at the time, and he introduced me to the private company who required ex-military personnel basically to work security on cargo ships. And being British, it was highly favourable for personnel to work on cargo ships. So it was fantastic. Dog. I think having a medical background really helped. I was quite surprised. A lot of there's 2 vessels I went on at a time on one contract. And the officers who are normally the medical officers, normally the second officer on their second role would be a medical officer on board. They're sort of trained to a reasonable standard, but I think because it's not the main job, there's quite a big skill fade. And it's an intensive course. I think it's maybe a week's course that they do. and they've got quite a big responsibility. I mean, the amount of drugs they carry on in the actual med room is quite extensive, really. Hey. Yeah, I mean, equipment-wise, it varies. Some of the ships are quite highly kitted out. Dogs, hey, come here. Wait 1 second, mate. Who wants to play fetch? No, going on. Yeah, so I mean, there's one instance where one of the vessels, it was newly taken over from a Chinese company, and it still had equipment on it that was broken. It didn't have an AED on board. Luckily, I actually took my own, so it was my responsibility. And yeah, it was, you know, a bit worrying, really. I mean, don't get me wrong, they've got telemedicine if needed. Yeah, so I mean, there was an instance on the first vessel where we were stuck at sea for 19 days while we were waiting to go into port. There was a chap on another vessel who ended up having a heart attack. And I think he was on the vessel for 3 days before he got picked up by another sort of vessel, really, a small boat, and took him to shore. Yeah, so you just got to, you know, have your wits about you, really.
So how did he like maintain him for 3 days after a cardiac arrest?
It'll just be. I think basically what happened was he had a heart attack, and then I managed to get him sort of stable, and then he was just in the med bay while they sort of got help to him. But it apparently happens all the time. There was another story where a chap had his finger amputated, and they were in the middle of nowhere, and I think the company didn't want to pay for helicopters to pick him up, so they had to wait 3 days till they got to the next port, which I believe was Brazil or something like that. And my colleague at the time, I mean, it was pretty stable. It was a clean cut, and it just basically looked after the wound daily, treated with antibiotics until they got to port. But yeah, I mean, it all depends on the situation, really. But it's definitely out now. You got to have your wits about you, and like I say, it's just going in with sort of being prepared and making sure that obviously you've got to work within your scope as well. But the guys who work with on the vessels, a lot of the time they are pretty good, and you know, they'd often come to me and they'd be like, "Oh, we've got so and so on the vessel, and he's not feeling very well, and couldn't you give us a bit of advice?" And I'm like, "Yeah, not a problem." Working alongside, obviously, their telemedicine, or a lot of time just be emails, talking to their designated doctor wherever they are in the world, and yeah, so yeah, I mean,
I was gonna say that what you just said there brings one to the next question. So you mentioned you go from cardiac arrest to amputations. What other kind of injuries can you see while offshore, and how
probably a
would you
mixture
deal with
of, yeah, I mean, it can be minor injuries. So we had a chap who was complaining of back pain, which was diagnosed with sciatica. I mean, we used to get that quite common for working on the ambulance service. You know, you get a call out on a Cat 4, "Oh, I can't move, I can't get out of bed," or whatever, and they've got sciatica, agony, you know, yeah. I mean, we'll laugh about it, but you sort of get to know the type of patients and how to sort of treat them as such. And yeah, so you get a bit of all sorts. Generally, it's not so much a trauma, but it's more the day to day. I've hurt my hand, or I bent down a bit too much lifting something and I've hurt my back, or I've got a headache, I've got migraine, and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, like I say, at any time you could end up having someone who's having a stroke, having a heart attack, cardiac arrest. A lot of the guys that I work with were fairly young, early 20s. And then you've got the experienced guys. I think there was one chap I worked with who's getting on into his 60s, but by no means he was sort of fit as a fiddle. And you just basically got a rapport with the crew, and you said, you got any concern, just bell us up and we'll go from there. But yeah, I mean, we was actually, I think the worst one I actually had was I was after 2 months I was getting redeployed to another vessel. We ended up going from Texas, from the Gulf of Mexico back to over the Atlantic to Amsterdam, Rotterdam, I think it was. And I was asleep, and one of the other chaps who was in my team, who was on shift at the port, and one of the we used to call them port crew, so it's the guys that come on board to basically disconnect and reconnect containers, and he fell off into sort of the innards of the ship, and they ended up having to get a crane with a basket on it to sort of hoist him out. And I said to my crewmate, you should have woke me up. I could have, come and help. But that well switched on. It was literally minutes by, they got his crane, ambulance turned up, got him onto port, and they whisked him away to hospital. So, but yeah, anything can happen just at any time, and you just got to make sure that you're well prepared, really.
Yeah, interesting. So you're quite well travelled by the sounds of it, sea and land. Where would you say is the harshest environment to work, medical-wise?
To be fair, I would probably say it's the countries that they're totally different, sort of how they work to us. They might be sort of a one-off country, but they sort of the protocols are slightly different. In the UK, we would expect, we've got ambulances, we've got medics that can be there, sort of pretty rapid. And you go to places like, I don't know, South America, where there's no rush. That sort of, we'll get there when we get there, sort of thing. And kit's sort of not up to standard, even though they're well versed in what they do. It's just not readily available. So, I mean, some parts of Asia, same again. They're not sort of in a rush to do it. They're more bothered about getting the phone out and recording someone who's injured, and yeah, it's definitely an eye-opener, but you just gotta take it on the chin, really, and do the best you can, which is why really I like working in remote medicine, because you're taught how to adapt very quickly and use the resources that you've got. Yeah. I've got two dogs here, and they're playing with toys. So we work on frontline ambulances where we know that everything's kitted out. If we're running out low on stuff, we just nip to a local ambulance station and top up. We can call for backup if we need assistance from another crew, from a critical care paramedic, anything like that. But yeah, very quickly you become sort of well versed in, well, what do I do if I've not got this equipment, or what if something breaks? What if, a situation where there is nothing. You are the only person who is there to sort of give aid. And yeah, I just really enjoy it. Just there's nothing like it really.
Yeah. I've seen on your Instagram you've tagged British Rescue Group a few times. Now I'm aware of who
Yes.
they are. Have you worked with them yourself?
I haven't actually. No, it's another contact that I gained on Instagram. A cracking set of lads. But yeah, like I say, they come from military background
Yeah.
and work in some sort of remote locations, and a bit like myself really. Getting into sort of training for me it was more of an accident. Whilst on the vessels, I had a bit of downtime, and I thought, well, I'll do some instructor certs, so that in eventuality, maybe in the future, that I want to do some training, do some instructing, then I'm ready to go. But yeah, like I say, Ryan and the lads are cracking at what they do, and I've got quite a few contacts that the specialists in their own right. But yeah, it's just I found probably the past 5 years made a lot of contacts off social media, and they're always there to help, offer advice. Yeah, and I think it's sort of a great community really to be, not just a medic, but a remote medic. There's always someone out there to help you out.
So kit-wise, when you're offshore, do you have to use your own kit, or are they supplied kits? What's the stuff with?
Generally, yeah, it depends on the contract. If I'm contracting to another company, then obviously everything's supplied. Like when I was on when I went on the vessels, I sort of had a bit of a pre-warning really of what to expect. Obviously, the vessel's not always kitted out with stuff that's in date, or there might be stuff missing. So in that instance, I normally used to take my own equipment. But yeah, generally, if you're working for other companies, if they've got anything about them, they're generally well kitted out. A lot of the time, it's literally you've got your own med bay, and yeah, you've got everything you need really.
So like drugs-wise, what kind of like medication are you able to give or can give?
So same again, it all depends on scope. With me, not myself, being a fully qualified paramedic at the moment, I'm limited to what I can and can't give, as is on in the UK really. But take for example the vessels. They have everything, anything and everything. They've got lidocaine, they've got morphine, they've got all sorts. But you're obviously, if there's an instance where, for example, it's above my scope of practice, off. I could always ring for telemedicine and speak with the doctor, for example, and say, "Well, I've got this patient here. We need to give him something that's beyond my scope." Then there's a process that's always put in place where they'll talk you through certain situations, and it's almost like if you're on a frontline ambulance and you're working with a paramedic, for example, they'll a lot of time they'll let you draw up meds, and they'll obviously do their due diligence and checking it all and stuff like that. So it's a similar situation really, but yeah, it's it all depends on what it is. If it's within my scope, not a problem. If not, you just seek assistance.
So under the doctor's guidance over the phone, you can give something if he says.
Yeah, generally, if you obviously pre-deployment, generally have training with a doctor. Depends on the actual contract itself. Though, you know, it's CPD basically. You just have a bit more extensive training on the kit that you're going to use. Like anything, you know, what kit you take with you, you want to make sure that you can pretty much do it with your blindfolded. But yeah, it's always there's never been an instance where if I've felt like it's beyond my scope that I've not had the assistance there, you know, whether it be via telephone or actually back. Yeah.
So do you run the remote medicine page? So remote medical response, is that your company or?
Yeah, so that's my company. Like I mentioned before, it was sort of a bit of an accident, really. Funnily enough, obviously, when I started working frontline ambulance, my best friends that sort of offered it to me, really, was like, you know, come and work an ambulance, you'll love it, it's an amazing job, whatever. We were actually working on the same ambulance, and we used to quite often. We were quite a good team. And I sort of brought it up with him. I said, you know, I've got an interest in remote medicine, and you know, if I can sort of pair up my love for the outdoors with medicine, that'd be absolutely amazing. And we just sort of had a chat about it, and he says, oh yeah, you should look at doing, like, you know, trying to get on expeditions and sort of that sort of thing. And I was like, oh, it won't be a bad idea. I really, you know, do something like that. And then yeah, I just sort of came up with remote medical response, really, and sort of went with it. And over the years, we've just sort of expanded in certain areas, and you know, obviously we've started early this year more into the sort of training side of things, and yeah, it's just I can't really. I think just the comparison between frontline and being sort of outside and in areas where it's, you know, just different and anything can happen.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Good stuff. So we're coming to the end of the podcast now, time-wise. Where
Yep.
can people find your company and your Instagram?
So I would probably say our main sort of platform really would be Instagram. So remote medical response. I've also got a sister company which was called Outpost Medical, which is more of the sort of apparel really for medics who are, you know, SAR medics, expedition medics, things like that. I was getting quite a lot of requests for merch with our logo on, which is obviously behind me here, but without our name. So people want to wear it for work and obviously contracting and stuff like that. So I came up with the idea of Outpost Medical, which is gear for medics. And yeah, but YouTube, we're trying to build a bit better presence on YouTube, trying to get more content on there, more videos. But yeah, I'd say majority of the time, we're biggest one is Instagram for us.
Good stuff. I'll make sure to tag you on the bottom of this anyway.
Awesome.
It's been great to see
you. Yeah, appreciate
you, Neil. Take care, and I'll probably bump into you at some point.
No worries.
Nice speaking to you.
Appreciate the time.
No problem. See you later now.
All right, take care of yourself.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Paul.